I'm going straight to the sixth order of the day, which is a motion on the recommittal of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021. Standing in the name of Honorable ABUBAKAR Hassan FULATA, Honorable FULATA is invited to move the motion.
I am ABUBAKAR Hassan FULATA. I represent Berniwa, Krika Sama, Gudi Federal Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Jigawa State. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleague, I move for recommittal of Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021, HB 981. The House notes that the Electoral Act Amendment Bill was passed by the National Assembly and committed to the President for assent, but the assent was withheld. Also notes that withholding the assent, the President particularly referred to the amendment of Section 87 of the Electoral Act 2010, dealing with the mode of nomination of candidates by political parties. Further notes that Section 87, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act 2010 provides that the procedure for nomination of candidates by political parties for various elective positions shall be by direct or indirect primaries. Recalls that the National Assembly amended Section 87, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act 2010 and Clause 84, Clause 84.2 of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021 to read thus: procedure for nomination of candidates by political parties for various elective positions shall be by direct primaries. Cognizant of the need to allow political parties to choose the procedure for nomination of candidates for the elective positions, the House resolves to commit Section 84, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021 to the Committee of the Whole for reconsideration in accordance with Order 12, Order 12, Rule 20, Sub-Rule 1 to 3 of the Standing Orders of the House. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Those in support, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say nay. Ayes have it. And that's the ninth order of the day, which is consideration of a bill.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, what's your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I'm from Jigawa State. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I move for the suspension of relevant sections of Order 7 to enable Mr. Speaker preside over the Committee of the Whole. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
All right, those in support, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say nay. Ayes have it. So the ninth order of the day is the consideration of the Electoral Act number 6/2010 to reconsider the Electoral Act 2021 to regulate the conduct of elections in the federal, states, and area councils in the federal, capital territory, and for related matters. And before I call on the leader of the House to give us a short synopsis of what it says, I think it's very important I lay a little foundation on how we are where we are today. It's important. A letter was written by Mr. President after declining assent to the bill, and the relevant portion of the letter, paragraph 5 of Mr. President's letter, and it reads: in the premise of the above, I hereby signify to the National Assembly that I am constrained to withhold assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021 in line with the provisions of Section 58(1) and 4 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. It is my considered position that the political parties should be allowed to freely exercise the right of choice in deciding which of direct or indirect primaries to adopt in the conduct of their primary elections as their respective realities may permit. It is this letter that is this withholding on assent based on the letter from Mr. President, which we read on the floor last December. So it is this letter that has brought us where we are, and in line with the provisions of our rules, we are in order to recommit and reconsider based on the observation officially communicated to us as a House. The relevant rule here is Order 12, Rule 20, which the subhead is reconsideration of bills. And it says, any bill referred to the House by the President withholding assent may be reconsidered through a substantive motion by the House, which has been done. Paragraph 2 says the motion shall include all the clauses objected to by the President, which shall be reconsidered in the Committee of the Whole, which is what we're about to do. And I believe there's only one clause objected to by Mr. President. Sub 3, if necessary, the House may rescind its decision on this affected clause and reconsider the bill in the Committee of the Whole. So basically, our rules have tied our hands. We can't even go outside that clause to inject any other thing, even if we so desire. So we'll just go straight to the Leader of the House, who will just give us a, I'm not even sure if it's necessary, it's a one-line
thank you.
Clause.
I come from Kano State. Mr. Speaker, I think having rightly done what you have just done, I just rise to thank you so much for doing exactly what should have been my job on the floor. And I therefore stand to second all the reasons and facts you have put before members. That's why we're here, and I beg of members to consider in the interest of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and our people. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to do your job. Clause 84, which reads, a political party seeking to nominate candidates for election under this Act shall hold primaries. That's what that clause reads. Shall hold primaries for aspirants to all elective positions. So that establishes that primaries will be held. That's that clause. And then it goes on in carried. Sub 2, the procedure for the nomination of candidates by political parties for the various elective positions shall be, and this is the original thing that came to the House, shall be by direct or indirect primaries. Leader of the House, so that I don't take your job, can you revert us back to primary?
No, Mr. Speaker, or Chairman, whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No. Chairman, sir. Chairman, sir.
Members, I so move.
There are other errors. All right. I believe those other errors are being looked into. 4A. What does it say? Read it to us. Read it.
Chairman, I read. A political party that adopts the system of indirect primaries for the choice of its candidate shall adopt the procedure outlined below. A. In the case of nomination to the position of presidential candidate, a political party shall hold special conventions in each of the 36 states of the Federation and FCT. Then,
that is for direct. So,
where delegates shall vote, for each of the aspirants at designated centers in each state capital on specified dates. Mr. Chairman, if you go further, a national convention shall be held for the ratification. So you don't elect at the national conventions. The election of the presidential candidates will remain at the various state levels. That is what this English says, sir. And it is not the way the primaries have been held. This is not the intent of the Electoral Act that has been passed, that was referred back to us to consider the inclusion, to give Nigerians the option of direct or indirect. This still negates the principles of what we have always done here. And it is my suspicion, Mr. Chairman, that it is intended for this Electoral Act not to be signed. These are all obstacles that have been put on the way of Nigerians to actually determine who governs them so that they can provide effective leadership. Mr. Chairman, we have to take all these clauses one after the other and allow members to make inputs.
Thank you very much.
Chairman.
As a seasoned legislator, I have read the rules of the House to you, and you know that we are confined to the observations made by Mr. President. We have a near-perfect document. It may not be perfect, but we have a near-perfect document. Thank you. We adjourn to plenary. Honourable colleagues, the House in the Committee of Whole considered the report on a bill for an act to repeal the Electoral Act number 6/2010 and enact the Electoral Act 2021 to regulate the conduct of elections in the federal, state and local area councils in the Federal Capital Territory, and for related matters, and approve clause 84 sub 1 and sub 2 and the long title of the report. We'll ask the House Leader to move for the adoption of the report. House Leader, please move for adoption of the report.
I rise to move that this House do adopt the report of the Committee of the Whole as read by the Honourable Speaker. I so move. Thank you.
Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am Comrade Peter AKPATASON. I represent the people of Okigwe Federal Constituency. I'm from Edo State. Mr. Speaker, I second the motion as ably and correctly moved by the Leader of the House. I so second.
Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. Ayes have it. The report at the Committee of Whole on the reconsideration of the Electoral Act amendment has been adopted by the House, but for emphasis' sake, I need to state categorically that what was adopted, what was considered and adopted by the House was only one clause, and that was clause 84(2), and that was a clause to do with direct and indirect primaries. No other clause in the Electoral Act amendment was considered or adopted. So, the Electoral Act amendment that was sent ab initio initially to Mr. President remains as it is. The only change is 84(2), wherein we have now included, in addition, indirect primaries, which was what was originally brought to us by the Electoral Committee.
Yeah, my view on the Electoral Act is simple. Mr. President withdrew assent and he wrote back to the House reasons. He canvassed genuine reasons, and the House saw that the reasons he canvassed were genuine enough for us to revisit the Electoral Act. And you can see what has happened in the House today. What we have done is that the relevant clauses of the Electoral Act, we have been able to amend it. And an indirect rule, indirect primary that was omitted or deliberately taken out before was also inserted in the Electoral Act today. So what we have in the Electoral Act now, as amended today, we have the direct and the indirect.
Why has the House decided to expunge this consensus option?
The House decided because it wasn't, the consensus wasn't part of the original bill that was passed. It wasn't originally part of it.
You know, we are Nigerians and we represent the interests of Nigerians. Over the past weeks, there have been this clamor that we don't have to throw the baby and the bathwater. Well, if this is what will make us move some steps towards achieving transparency, towards achieving credibility in our elections, of course, it is worth sacrificing.
So why did you people decide to expunge this consensus option?
I didn't see consensus on the paper that I was given, so nothing was expunged from my own point of view. That is Senate. Probably it was before them, but before us there was no consensus.
So we have lawmakers screaming no consensus, no consensus. Why were lawmakers against the consensus?
Probably they got wind of what had happened in the Senate, and just like you're asking me, and of course everybody is free to say what he wants to say.
But what's your take on consensus candidacy?
Whatever will guarantee that the electoral process in this country is reliable, is credible, and guarantees that the best leads, I am for it.
For a simple reason, that they clamor for us to pass an electoral bill that will take care of the anomalies we've had in the past, outside party affairs that has to deal squarely with a political party, simply because Nigerians want a free, fair, credible process. And having to deal with only what the president rejected, which is direct primaries. Before now, even the PDP would do.
The question is, why did the House decide to go back on its earlier decision on direct primaries? Why did you now include direct primaries?
No, of course, it's a clamor by Nigerians. What else? We're here to represent the people. So my constituents have told me that if that be the case, that the president is objecting to the direct primaries, then we must do everything within our powers to make sure that the document itself is passed. And so since we couldn't agree on a definite issue, we just added whether direct or indirect and let the political party choose whichever one they want.
Just like the Senate passed the consensus option, but the House was clear that it didn't want the consensus option.
Sure. Yeah, because it's like it was vague. It wasn't quite elaborated upon. How does a party determine its consensus candidate? These are some of the things you should look at. You cannot give a vague, so a political party, the chairman of the party can decide in a room who the consensus candidate can be. If there are steps to it and determine what it means to have a consensus candidate, and if we see the document, then we can consider that the president only made an observation and objected to a particular proviso in the bill, and that is what we dealt with today. Nothing more, nothing else. And the provisions in the House didn't give us the leeway. Our laws didn't give us the leeway to add or to remove anything else, but to deal with the issues the president has said we should do.
You know, based on the rules of the House, the decision of the House today is actually based on the rules that what we committed back to the House was what was passed earlier, and then the House based their decision on the president's position that indirect should be incorporated as an option. So that's exactly what the House has done today. So the House decided to honor Mr. President by respecting his opinion. As it is right now, we have inserted the indirect. So I think the consensus, it wasn't discussed here. So the position... we just heard that the Senate has passed consensus, but for here, it wasn't part of the proposal that we have before the House. So what we had as a House before now was the issue of indirect and direct. So we actually settled on the two. So we don't know anything about consensus for now.
This morning, the House rose from its plenary. We have been brought together to reconsider the amendment to some areas, sections of the Electoral Bill that needed some touch. And one of those were the areas of mode of primaries for political parties. During consideration by clauses, members resorted to a rowdy session when the issue of direct, indirect mode of primaries was followed by consensus mode of nomination. I think is totally not unconnected with the fact that members didn't think that the consensus was as democratic as the interment of the amendments were scheduled. And from the letter that was transmitted to the National Assembly for reconsideration so that it makes it easier for the President to accent what was originally in the part 42B that was considered was 42 was a mode of primaries to be direct or indirect. But I think the House has done justice to those sections in contention or with grey issues, wherein we have sought the opinion of our constituents and the general Nigerians, and we have delivered a section that is well acceptable to all and sundry, which by implication is that political parties now owe it a duty of care, a duty to aspirants to conduct primaries in either direct or indirect, whichever suits them, or with the guidelines that have been provided therein.